Hi, I'm Brian McKenzie. I'm a researcher at TrustRadius and a longtime WordPress user. I currently use WordPress for my personal hobby blog, but I've also used it to build marketing sites and e-commerce sites. WordPress can be intimidating for new users, so I'm going to go over the basics that you need to get started with the program. I've also added timestamps in the description of the video if you want to jump to a certain portion of it. The first thing you'll have to do if you want to make a WordPress site is find a hosting service and a domain name provider. This tutorial isn't going to cover the details of how to host a site, because that may vary depending on the hosting service you end up choosing. But regardless, you're going to have to pay a hosting service and purchase a domain name before you can launch your WordPress site to the public. A hosting service provides the servers and networking that let people reach your site. I use Bluehost for my personal website, but there are many options for hosting that range from $50 a year to hundreds per year. More expensive options tend to offer features like higher security, premium support, and automatic site backups. A domain name is the URL people type into their browser to access your site. For example, TrustRadius's URL is trustradius.com. Domain names can vary in price greatly because they're totally unique. So a competitive domain can cost hundreds to thousands of dollars, while a less desired one could be under $20. When looking for a host or a domain name, consider checking out reviews of hosting services on TrustRadius.com. We've published hundreds of reviews from verified users of these services, so you can find the best fit for your needs. You can find these reviews at the link in the description. Once you've settled on your host and purchased your domain name, your hosting service can provide instructions on how to host your site and install WordPress. Typically, this will just be a one-click process. You'll also need to create a username and a password for your admin account on your site. Once everything is set up, you can access your site's dashboard for editing by going to your domain name plus /wp-admin. Once you've accessed your site by going to your URL /wp-admin and logging in, you should be taken to a dashboard that looks like this. It might be a little different, but generally it should be pretty similar. But before we go into what all the tools here do, we should start by adding a theme to our site. A WordPress theme is a series of templates and styles that help you build pages that look similar without having to write any code. For users familiar with coding, you can build your own theme using CSS and PHP, but for beginners, there's a wide variety of pre-built themes, many of which are available for free. To browse the themes you have available and to add new ones, we can go to Appearance and click on Themes. You can see that I use the Blogger theme, specifically designed for blogging, but there's also a few themes in here that were pre-installed, so you'll probably see a couple of these themes, like the 2021, in your dashboard as well. But if we want to add a new theme for our specific use case, we can click on Add New. And from this menu, we can search all of the themes that have been added to WordPress. There are also themes that are available on third-party sites that you can add by clicking Upload, choosing File, and then finding it on your computer. But if you're just searching one in here, you can sort by features, by popularity, or by searching keywords. Bear in mind that while there's a lot of free themes, some of them will also be premium, so make sure you keep an eye out and set a budget for yourself. But once you've selected one, you can go back to Themes and click one to activate. Once you've done that, you're ready to start customizing your site and using the tools. The first option we have on our toolbar is the dashboard. You can think of the dashboard as the home screen of your administrator tool. When you click it, or click home in its submenu, it'll take you to this home page, which will provide simple analytics, quick post options, and more depending on your theme and the plugins you have installed. I'll go more into plugins later. You may notice some of the notifications on the top of my screen. This is a common side effect of having free plugins. Usually the reason they're free is because they advertise to you a bit. After the home option is the updates option. The updates page will let you know if any of your plugins or themes need an update, and you'll be able to update them all from this page in one click. All of my plugins and themes are currently updated, but if they weren't, there would be an orange notification right next to updates in the tab. This would indicate that I have updates ready to go, and it would tell you exactly how many in that indicator. It's good to update as often as possible and as soon as possible to ensure that all of your plugins and themes remain in working order. If you let a plugin get too outdated while other things get updated, it can cause problems on your site and, in the worst case, even break parts of your pages. After the Updates tab is the Insights tab. This will provide traffic stats based on whatever analytics tool you use. I use Monster Insights, which by default shows me sessions and page views, though this might look different if you use a different analytics tool. In fact, you might not even have this insights option right here, or it might be called something slightly different depending on the tool that you're using. Monster Insights is a strong analytics choice for people running blogs or personal sites, as it's free and provides detailed analytics. However, if you want a more marketing approach to your insights tool, you could try something like the HubSpot plugin, which handles insights from a marketing approach and plugs directly into HubSpot CRM. There's all sorts of other tools you can add, most of which are just plugins, which we'll get into the specifics of how to install later. All of the information on Jetpack is also pulled from WordPress.com, so sometimes it'll have some problems and you'll have to view the stats on WordPress.com instead. You'll also have to link to WordPress.com. This will all be very easy if your site was hosted there already, but if you're making a new site from scratch, I wouldn't worry too much about Jetpack. You can use other tools instead. The next tool we have is our Posts tool. And this is where you'll produce most of your content if you're using a theme designed around blogging like I am. From the Posts interface, you can edit existing posts, create new posts, or perform bulk actions by checking off multiple posts at a time, and then selecting the action you want to do, and then clicking Apply. You can also create a new post by clicking Add New. Once we've clicked to add a new post, we'll see the WordPress editor, which we can use to add a title and text content to our post. In addition to adding text content, we can also add paragraphs, images, headers, contact forms, any functionality that WordPress has, we can add to our posts. So if we wanted to add an image, we could add from a URL, add from our media library, or upload a new image. Anytime we upload an image, it's going to get saved in the media library anyway. So it's usually good to upload here or just select from media library if you already have it uploaded. So you'll just select your image, click select, and it'll be added to your post. Once you have all your content written, you can preview it using the preview button, which lets you see what the post will look like once you've published it. So if we click preview, we can select if we want it to be a desktop, tablet, or mobile preview, and we can click preview in a new tab, and it will create what our page will look like. So this is what the post would look like if we published it as it was. As you can see, there's also a header, a menu, and a footer, which are controlled by the theme and what I've added to the theme. But we'll get into more of that later. There are a few things in the post editor that you can change in this sidebar that aren't visible in the preview. One of the big ones is categories, which kind of determines how your site's organized. So the categories will determine where a post goes on your site. So to show you an example, this is my site. If we click this header, every blog that has this in the category will appear here. But if I go here, the reviews, you'll see almost all of that goes away, and the only post I have that's tagged reviews shows up. So categories is how WordPress determines where things belong on your site. And you set that when you're editing the post right here. You can have as many categories as you want, but it's good to make sure you're only putting things in the categories that they belong in. That way people can easily find them. Tags are mostly used to help people search for things on your site. If you have a lot of posts and people want to search through them, you can add keywords here that will help them find them when they search, and it can also have some SEO benefits. You can also add a featured image to your site. That you just go in, select the featured image, and click Set Featured Image. And what the featured image does is it just determines what image shows up here alongside your post. So if you set no featured image, this wouldn't be here, and it would just be all of this. So it's good to set featured images. It helps with SEO, and people tend to like them. So you should always add a featured image when you can. The media library is where all the images, videos, spreadsheets, and documents on your site will live. Your content pages pull from this library when you add any of that content to your pages or posts. You can click on images to delete them or edit their metadata. The most important metadata here is the alternative text, which is what appears on screen readers if someone who can't see uses your site. So it's important to have a descriptive alternative text on every image so that it's accessible to all your users. Title and description, you can be pretty brief on. Caption, I like to leave blank because on many themes, this is just automatically going to appear under your image. And I like to set that on a case-by-case basis. So I leave caption blank. Pictures can take up a lot of space on your site, which can make it load slower for users. So if you don't want to optimize your images manually, you can use a plugin like Smush to optimize them yourself. You can see here, it's reduced this one by 2.1%. So this one was already pretty small, but sometimes you'll upload a big image and you'll save a lot of space by having Smush optimizing all of your images. After the media library is Pages, and Pages, like Posts, allow you to create content for your site. Unlike Posts, though, Pages are usually used for sites' landing pages, contact pages, and things to that effect. You're likely to use this tool a lot if you're making a site for a business or an e-commerce site. Since my site is blog-based, I hardly use any pages. The editor is almost exactly the same as the Post editor, with just some different options in the sidebar, such as slug, which is going to determine what the end of the URL is. So if we change this to test, you can see the end of the URL is now test. The main functional difference between Pages and Posts is how your theme handles them. In my theme, posts are automatically added to the queue on the front page or on the appropriate category page. In contrast, pages don't appear at all on my theme unless I manually add them to a menu or otherwise link to them from somewhere. So for a blogger like myself, there's really no need to add a lot of pages, but if you're building a site or you want a landing page, then you might want to build a page instead of a post. This is another site I've worked on where we used pages more than posts, and it's a completely different theme. And the reason we did that is because this is a site about signing kids up for summer camp, so there's no blog posts and it's all static content. And for that, pages are great. So we can click into a page we made here. You can see this theme actually comes with its own editor. So if we click Edit with Divi, which is the name of the theme, we don't need to restore to our autosave. We can edit the page here with inline text. We can add elements, pull new sections, and make changes to them however we want. If your site is open to comments and feedback, you'll access those from the comments and feedback tabs. The comments tab is where when anyone leaves a comment anywhere on your site, it will appear here. By default, comments have to be approved before they can appear on your site, so this is where you can approve or unapprove comments. You can also reply, mark comments as spam, trash them, or edit them if you made them. Some themes, particularly blogging themes, also include a feedback function where you can see how users rate your posts. The functionality is almost exactly the same as the comments tool in that you can approve, reject, or delete feedback. You can also export all feedback as a CSV for easy analysis. Depending on your theme, this tab might not be here, and if you aren't actively directing users to give you feedback, it'll usually be empty, even if your theme has one. The Appearance tab contains a number of tools, including the Themes function we discussed earlier. This is the section where you can customize a lot of what your site looks like, including the CSS, colors, and menus. Let's start with the Customize button. The Customize button will take you to a preview of your site and give you a number of options for customizing it. I'm going to be going over some of the more commonly used tools here. The Main Style tool sets several default styles, including the header size, text font, image margins, and more. The other options on the menu give more granular control, and as you make changes, you'll see them previewed live, but none of them will take effect unless you click Publish. So I can click through however many main styles that I want. You can see it's changing my fonts, it's changing the header size, that one even changed the menu. But unless I hit Publish, none of these changes will actually be taken live. Using the General tab, you can edit the layout of your page, as well as the font style, size, and color. So in layout, we can change it from full width to boxed. But since our elements are mostly in the middle of the page, you'll find this actually doesn't change our site too much in the desktop view. Fonts, we can change what our default font is, and we can change the sizes, and again, none of this will go live unless we hit Publish. Here we can change the colors of our text, so we can make our body text green if we want. Site identity is where you can set the title of your page and the tagline. You can see that appears here on this theme, but it might appear elsewhere on yours. This will also set the title of your site when you search it on the internet or as it appears at the top of a browser. So you want to make sure you're not changing your site title very often. You can also set an image logo here. In the header section, you can change how your top level header appears, which will usually also encompass your top menu. So you can see right now we have it set to menu top, which is why it's on top here. But if we set it to one row, they'll be together. Similarly, we can use menu to change the menu behavior. Right now it's a sticky menu, so as I scroll, it stays at the top of my screen. But if I switch it to static, once it finishes loading, it won't follow. You can also change your footer in the footer section, but if you're using a blog like mine where it just keeps scrolling, you might not have need to edit the footer much. But if you're a business and you have a footer, this is where you can edit its layout and how many columns it has. If your page is a blog, you can go to the blog section to change how your blog posts are laid out. So I can click here, and currently I have them stacked on top of each other, but I can switch them to a grid. And they'll go side to side, two at a time, or I can change it to a list or circles. But you want to be a little careful when you change these too much, because as you'll notice, if I switch it to circles, some of my images are getting cut off. So if you already loaded your images for a certain way to be displayed, when you change that, you might have to change your images around too to make it work. You can also change post styles in the post page. Here we can go to one so I can show you an example of that. Most of these just change how the header and title are placed. So largely this is just changing the basic appearance of the post, and you can do that through the single post menu. If you have a sidebar, you can edit it with the sidebar tool. If you're using a portfolio, there's some portfolio editing options here too. You can also add additional CSS to your site here, which is also accessible from the Appearance tab. To add CSS, you can just type right in. So you can add rules very simply. You can see it changed. And again, none of this will get published unless I hit publish. So I have all of these changes in, but I don't want any of them. So I can just click X and it'll tell me that my changes will be lost, and I can click OK, and none of those changes will be made. Alternatively, if you wanted to make the changes, you would hit publish. Under the Menus tab in Appearance, you can create menus that link to specific pages on your site. To add an item to a menu, you just click it on the left and then you click Add to Menu. And in a second, it'll drag it in here. You can also grab posts or custom links to put in here. So once it's in your menu, you can organize it by dragging it around. You can even drag it under elements to make drop-down links. So on the site, this would be a drop-down. So if they hovered it, they would see this sub-item. You can also change the navigation label. So if we made this test, the item in the menu would still link to the same page, but the users would see test and they would click on the word test instead of the word blog. You can also remove elements by just clicking remove on them. And then if you want to save your menu, you just click save. The theme editor under Appearance is where you can edit the files that make up your theme. If you aren't familiar with PHP and CSS, it's usually a good idea to just stay out of this tab. But if you're more familiar with CSS or PHP, changes here can impact the entire site with just a few lines of code. But at the same time, they can also damage your whole site with just a few lines of code. But the reason I think it's valuable to know this is here, even if you're a beginner, is that if you ever need support with your theme, it's possible that the support technician will tell you to go in here and make some specific changes, so it's good to know how to get here. Plugins, which are stored in the Plugins tab, are third-party add-ons for WordPress that extend the functionality of your site. You can install them directly in this dashboard, and they're available from price points that range from free to hundreds of dollars. From this page, this dashboard, you can activate, deactivate, and change the settings on plugins. You can also click Add New to search and get new ones. From this interface, you can search for plugins by keyword, filter by popularity, or recommendations based on other plugins you're using. If you want one, you just click Activate, and it will install it and activate it for you. You can find plugins for all sorts of functions, but a few popular ones are Yoast, which adds SEO functions to your site, Auto-optimize, which speeds up your site by optimizing CSS and JavaScript, and fastest cache, which handles website caching. If you run a business or e-commerce site, you may need a sales handler or card verifier, such as Stripe or WooCommerce. It's also worth noting that you don't want to overload your site with plugins. Adding too many of these can start to slow down your site, so a good rule of thumb is keep it to 10 to 15 and try not to have too many more than that. After plugins, users is where you can manage your admin profile or add contributors to the site. When you make a new user, you get the same interface that appears if you edit an existing user, where you can set a username and email, some optional fields, and a user role. By default, on my site, subscriber is the first role you get, which really doesn't let you do anything. But if I wanted to add multiple contributors to the site, I could give them the author tag, which would let them create posts and pages, but not edit any backend settings, or editor rights, which would let them edit pages, but not actually make any new content. If you have multiple contributors, for example, if you're a business, it's important to be careful with user roles. But if you're the only one running your site and there's no user profiles you need to make, you don't really need to touch this panel much. You should just be able to use your admin account and not worry about anything else. Settings lets you change a number of things on your site, such as time zone, site title, and more. Most of these settings can also be changed in other tools we've discussed already, and the tabs in here might look different depending on what plugins you have. As you can see, I can change my auto-optimize settings here. When you make your site, you should definitely check out the General tab and set your site title, and if you have a privacy policy, you should mark that page in the privacy section. But other than that, you shouldn't need to fiddle too much with these settings just to launch your site. As you come across some specific use cases, you might need to interact with this more, but to begin with, just set your general settings, add a privacy policy if you have one, and then you should be good to go. With all those tools in mind, you should know all that you need to launch your first WordPress site and start making content. Depending on your use case, you might have some specific needs I didn't cover, but there's lots of documentation online for every use case you can think of. Most hosting services offer support for hosting problems, and theme providers often offer specialized support for any theme issues. If you're still on the fence about WordPress, consider checking out some verified reviews at TrustRadius.com or at the link in the description. We publish detailed reviews of various software options by real users, such as this one by a self-employed ICO analyst. Alternatively, if you end up using WordPress, we'd love to hear your feedback, also at the link in the description.